Thank you, Representative Muir. This is, most of you have heard me before, and I usually bring all the bad news, and I will be again. But first, let me pause and say a word of commendation to those of you who provide services to indigent defendants. You've been working long and hard. The fruits of your labor are well recognized and should be. You've kept this ship afloat, usually for very little compensation. So thank you to those who work in this field. Thank you also to the judges who have made this system work. And thank you to the commissioners' courts who up to this point have carried the funding load for this. So there's good work being done out there and improvements being made, and you're doing a great deal with very little, and you deserve to be recognized and thanked for that, and I do. I'm going to talk as usual about funding. If you've heard me before, thank you to Representative Muir, who's much too modest to take credit for the little bit of good news that we have. As he said, there is something on the horizon in that the state passed Senate Bill 2053, and if they don't mess with it next time, there will be additional funding coming from the state. How much more? Look at it. It's over 50% more. I mean, that points out how little funding the state's been putting into the system, but if we can hang on to that money through the next session and get it appropriated, there at least is some additional money coming into the dedicated fund for the Indigent Defense Commission. And let me say a word about the commission and its staff, Jim Bethke and the people who work with them. We could not have a better partner. I cannot tell you how unusual they are. For a state agency to actually step up and not only adopt positions calling for state funding, but show up at the Appropriations Committee hearings and Senate Finance Committee hearings and point out how little the state's doing to meet its responsibility in this area is unheard of. And they continue to step up and bring that message, and it's a very important part of what we're trying to do on funding. So thank you to the commission and the staff. So Senate Bill 2053 hopefully is coming with the additional funding from it, and it will certainly make a difference if we're able to get that money appropriated in the next session. But let's don't forget where we are. The funding requirements for the indigent defense system continues to grow. That's not unexpected. We knew when we started on this journey back in 2001 that we were woefully underfunded and that our system was no system. Every court had to meet the responsibility of seeing that the defendants in its court received their constitutionally guaranteed right to representation with no program, no standards, nothing at all from the state. And we went from nothing to what's been recognized as one of, if not the best program in the country. But we did not do it with state money. We've done it with county money, and we continue to do it with county money. And as the needs continue and we try to do a better job, it takes more money. The rate of increase exceeds and has exceeded and will likely continue to exceed 10% growth per year as we try to catch up on what we've not been doing, as well as adequately meet the needs of those in the system. So the state, as you can see from the red line, went from zero funding to a little bit of funding, and from time to time through fees and costs that we collect and send to the state, has sent some of them back, but only rarely, and only in the last two sessions has the state put any general revenue money into the program. But they go up and down, but have lingered around and continue to be at about 12% of the funding for the indigent criminal defense system, with the remainder being on counties. Now, you may say, well, Jim, what's the problem with that if we're getting the job done? Well, there are two problems with it. One, it's the state's responsibility to provide indigent defense. And I don't believe the program, I don't believe any of us or much anyone else will argue that we are adequately funding the program. We're not. Number two, trying to do so with county dollars is going to inevitably lead to a failure of the system. We are funding the system out of property tax dollars. We don't have a statewide program. We have 254 programs. Every county, in essence, because of the funding stream, is required to meet most of the funding requirements for the program. That funding base is not equal. There are counties out there with a great deal of need and very little tax base. Some of the counties that have been trying to do the best and been evaluated as doing the best are reaching their constitutional limit on property taxation. A lot of people don't know. Counties have an 80-cent maximum tax rate, and there are counties out there that are at that rate. If our need continues to grow, as I think it will, at 10% or more, there are counties that inevitably will not be able to meet that need. That means there will not be, by anyone's standard, a constitutional system in those counties. A chain is only as strong as its weakest link. We've got 254 links. If any one of them fails, the system fails. If there's not a constitutional program for every defendant in this state, no matter where they come into court, then there's not a constitutional program. And that must be addressed. So while I give the commission, the judges, those of you who work in this field, very high marks. In my mind, your A's and A pluses. Once again, I must give the legislature, at best, a D minus. Because while they passed the bill that Representative Muir and Senator West carried for us so ably, that maybe in the future we'll put more money in, they actually reduced the state's share of funding otherwise. Reduced it. So here I am again, the bearer of bad news, I guess, on funding. But I just cannot fail to point that out, that we are teetering again on the edge of whether or not the system can survive until the state steps up and meets its responsibility. Thank you for what you do.